loans.
And so, is this the FHA paying for 2007?
Initiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I just returned from spending the weekend at my home state of Wyoming, traveling around the state, visiting with people in Natrona County, in Casper, as well as in Rock Springs, Wyoming, at a marvelous event there in Sweetwater County that they have every year called Cowboys Against Cancer. 700 people were there to celebrate successes and remember those who we've lost in these battles. And I was there along with Senator Enzi, as well as our governor and others, talking about the issues that are facing the nation, which, of course, on everyone's mind is the health care law. And this has been a very rough 5 weeks for hardworking Americans who are concerned about their health. And this obviously came out for significant discussion at the Cowboys Against Cancer event Saturday night in Wyoming. Mr. President, many people were hoping that the Democrats' health care law would actually help decrease costs, that it would actually help increase access to quality health care, but all America knows that just hasn't happened, Mr. President. On October 1st, the Obama administration launched its health care exchange. This was to be the biggest moment of the President's signature achievement in office. It's one that people were looking for years to the opening of the exchanges, and I would just say, Mr. President, it flopped. It completely flopped. The website crashed, and it fell right on the heads of the people who were already anxious about their health care. People all across the country saw this collapse, and even the late-night comedians have made a lot of jokes about the incompetence and the mismanagement of the Obama administration. But, Mr. President, I have to tell you that the failure of the exchange is no laughing matter, because this is much more than a failed website. Real people who are facing real health care problems are being hurt because of this administration's failed health care law. Because of this law, millions of people are getting letters saying that their insurance has been canceled. And I've talked to some of them this past weekend in Wyoming. At least 3.5 million across the country, and the number continues to climb every day. Now, the Obama administration says that's no big deal. They say only 3.5 million people are losing the insurance plans they have now. But this administration's goal, their goal was just 7 million people covered in the exchanges. So why does the White House think that 3.5 million Americans losing their coverage is no big deal when their goal this year is 7 million Americans? President Obama and Democrats in Congress promised over and over again that if you liked your insurance, you could keep it. And it just wasn't true. The Washington Post fact-checker looked into the president's claim. These are the folks that say, truthful, not truthful. They gave him the full 4 Pinocchios for completely false claims. The fact-checker wrote, quote, "The president's promise apparently came with a very large caveat. If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan if we, meaning the White House, if we deem it to be adequate." Well, the president never said that. If the White House had been honest about people losing their health insurance, this law would never have passed. But the law did pass, and people across the country are learning how much it's going to actually hurt them personally. For millions of people who are losing the insurance that they have, they're finding that the options available under the Democrats' health care law are much more limited and much more expensive. Their rates are higher, their deductibles are higher, their co-pays are higher. It's not the kind of reform that people wanted or needed, but that's what the Washington Democrats gave them. The cost increases and the canceled insurance policies are just the beginning. A lot of people are now starting to realize that they're no longer going to have access to their family's doctor. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. President Obama said in 2009, he said, "We will keep this promise." This is a quote. He said, "We will keep this promise. If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period." That's what President Obama said. If the White House had been honest about how many families were going to lose access to their doctors, this health care law would never have passed. Well, the White House did make that promise. Democrats did pass that law, and American families all across the country are suffering as a result. So coming back from Wyoming this morning, Mr. President, picked up USA Today. Now, this is a newspaper whose editorial page had supported the President's health care law. But their view today, coverage cancellations belie Obama's promise. It says Obamacare is starting to resemble a patient bleeding from self-inflicted wounds. A month after launch, the online health exchanges, they say, where individuals are supposed to shop for insurance remain slow or unusable, except in the states that opted to run their own marketplaces and did a more competent job than the administration. States more competent than the administration. As if that weren't trouble enough, they say, critics are justifiably mocking President Obama for his repeated untrue promise that if people liked their health plans, they could keep them. Oops, the editorial on the opinion page of today's USA Today says, oops, hundreds of thousands of people are getting termination notices for plans that don't meet the strict new requirements of the Affordable Care Act. Presumably, they say, not all those people disliked their plans. They go on. Now the President, he can't seem to admit he overpromised and oversimplified. He and his aides, they say, compound their credibility problem by suggesting that people whose plans are being canceled, quote, just shop around in the new marketplace, close quote. A laughable impossibility, they say, while healthcare.gov is plagued by bugs. So that's this morning's USA Today as I'm coming back from Wyoming. And then I pick up the Wall Street Journal and turn to another column. This is a guest column. You also can't keep your doctor. You also can't keep your doctor. A little subheadline, I had great cancer care and health insurance. My plan was canceled. Now I worry how long I'll live. I'm sorry the Senate chamber isn't full of all of those people who voted for this health care law as this woman worries how long she'll live. The Wall Street Journal, it's an absolutely devastating piece by one woman who's suffering because of the health care law. Her name is Edie Littlefield-Sunby. She wrote about her experience fighting stage 4 gallbladder cancer. She had a health care plan with affordable access to good doctors who, she points out, saved her life. And as a doctor, I will tell you, stage 4 gallbladder cancer has a very small chance of success and survival. She has beaten the odds because of those taking care of her. But now she's been told that the plan that she has is being canceled because of the President's health care law. Here's what she wrote. She said, what happened to the President's promise you can keep your health plan, or the promise that you can keep your doctor? Thanks to the law, she writes, I have been forced to give up a world-class health plan. A world-class health plan. The exchange would force me to give up a world-class physician. Now, she's had some of the best physicians in the world, MD Anderson in Texas and California, at Stanford, as well as in her home community in San Diego. Washington Democrats knew that their law would harm people like this lady who writes today in the Wall Street Journal. They knew that people like her all across the country would lose their insurance and lose their doctors. They just didn't want the American people to know it. It was in the regulations that they wrote and they supported. The issue has to do with a section of the health care law that says that anyone who had an insurance policy on March 23, 2010, and continued to renew it, could keep it, even after the Obamacare exchanges launched. It was called a grandfather clause to protect people from the law's new rules and mandates, to let people, if they had something they like, keep what they had. But less than 3 months after the President signed his health care law, the administration issued a regulation. And the regulation set very specific criteria that these health plans had to meet in order to be grandfathered. The regulation dismantled the section of the law by placing unreasonable, tight restrictions on grandfathered policies. Now, any routine change made to a grandfathered insurance plan immediately breaks the Democrats' promise that Americans can keep their health insurance. A lot of consumers want the freedom and the flexibility, Mr. President, to increase their plan's deductible or their co-payments rather than face higher monthly premiums. It's a natural thing to want to do. People do it with their health insurance, they do it with their car insurance, they do it with their homeowner's insurance. It is just part of being responsible, looking at things and making decisions for you and your family. The Obama administration's regulations took away that choice. Well, Republicans saw this train wreck coming, and we tried to stop it. Actually, it was my colleague, Senator Enzi from Wyoming, who back in 2010, Mike Enzi brought Senate Joint Resolution 39 to this floor in this body. This was a resolution to disapprove. This resolution of disapproval would have immediately overturned the administration's burdensome regulations on grandfathering. What Senator Enzi brought to the floor for a vote of the entire body would have, if passed, allowed everyone to keep the insurance they had if they liked it, basically to uphold the President's promise. Republicans supported this resolution. Senate Democrats voted against it in lockstep. Absolutely every one of them said no. They kept the regulation on the books and made sure people would not be able to keep the insurance policy they had if they like it. Now, Democrats don't want to hear about people like Edie with stage 4 gallbladder cancer. Republicans do want to hear about people like her, people who are losing their coverage because of this health care law. We want people to tell us their stories by tweeting with the hashtag #YourStory. We want to make sure that nobody in the Obama administration forgets that these are real people and they have been hurt by this health care law, which the President has continued to, on party lines, force down the throats of the American people in its passage, and then continue to deliberately deceive the American people with his quotes as recently as this year, not too very long ago, and repeated so many times, if you like your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan. Republicans support real health care reform. We support ideas like allowing people to buy insurance across state lines. That would increase access to coverage and to care, not decrease it. That would increase competition. It would bring down prices, wouldn't raise them. But the Democrats' health care law is doing just that. It would be a reform that would actually help the American people, but the Obama health care law took the exact opposite approach. Here's how Edie Littlefield Sunday put it in her story. She wrote, "Before the Affordable Care Act, health insurance policies could not be sold across state lines. Now," she says, "policies sold on the Affordable Care Act exchanges may not be offered across county lines." That should change, Mr. President. President Obama and Washington Democrats wanted a political win. They were willing to do anything, say whatever they needed to get that win, whether it was true or not. Now, if they had been honest with the American people, they would have never gotten this law passed. But the Democrats' health care law today in America is hurting people, hurting families, hurting Americans. This must end. The President should come to the table. He should work with Republicans to pass real reform and to help the American people who have been hurt and continue to be hurt by his health care law. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
You may have noticed some of the tweets that lawmakers are working today on non-discrimination legislation for LGBT employees. Senators have scheduled a test vote for 5:30 today. They'll also be voting on 2 judicial nominations, and live coverage here on C-SPAN 2. Tomorrow, Marilyn Tavenner, the head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, testifies again on the healthcare.gov website and the rollout of the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare. She'll appear before the Senate Health Committee starting at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, and you can watch that live on our companion network, C-SPAN. Also on Wednesday, more about the healthcare website and the healthcare law with Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius. She'll testify before the Senate Finance Committee starting at 10 a.m. Eastern, and you can see that on C-SPAN as well. We're waiting for senators to come to the floor, and while we do that, more of this morning's Washington Journal, where our guest spoke about the housing market.
Each week in this segment of the Washington Journal, we take a look at how your money is at work in a different federal program. And this week, Wall Street Journal reporter Nick Timmeros joins us from New York to talk about the Federal Housing Administration, which for the first time in its 80-year history asked for and received a transfer this year from the Treasury Department to stabilize its financial position. The transfer came out to about $1.7 billion. Nick Timmeros, for those folks who may not be familiar with the FHA, what is it and why did it need these funds?
So the Federal Housing Administration is a major guarantor of mortgages for single-family homes in the United States, and it's played a small role in normal times. It's played a really important role, a very large role, over the last few years, really since the housing bust deepened beginning in 2007, when private mortgage capital retreated. The FHA went from being a very small player during the boom to a phenomenally large player during the bust. And so if you've gotten a mortgage over the past few years and you haven't had a 5% or a 10% down payment, there's a really good chance that your loan was actually backed by the FHA. The FHA doesn't make loans, but insures loans that meet its standards.
That objection.
Mr. President, I've come to the floor this afternoon to talk about a bipartisan effort to advance uniquely American values: freedom, fairness, and opportunity. The Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or ENDA, has at its foundation these core values. It's about freedom, the freedom to realize our founding belief that all Americans are created equal under the law. It's about fairness, about whether lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Americans deserve to be treated just like their family members, their friends, their neighbors, and fellow workers. It's about opportunity, about whether every American gets to dream the same dreams, chase the same ambitions, and have the same shot at success. 1 year ago this week, the people of Wisconsin elected me to the United States Senate. The citizens of Wisconsin made history, electing our state's first woman to the United States Senate and electing the first out gay or lesbian person to the United States Senate in the history of our great nation. But I didn't run to make history. I ran to make a difference that would give everyone a fair shot at achieving their dreams. I couldn't be more proud of the bipartisan effort to make a difference with the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. I want to thank and recognize my colleagues, Senators Mark Kirk, Jeff Merkley, Susan Collins, and Tom Harkin, for their leadership, working across party lines and moving this legislation forward. I take great pride at being a part of this effort, and I think it shows great promise of what can be achieved if we work together in a bipartisan way to get things done for the American people. I also want to take the time to recognize the 55 co-sponsors of this bill, both Democrats and Republicans, who made a commitment to ending discrimination against our fellow citizens simply because of who they are and who they love. I realize that for some, this is not an easy vote. I understand for some, they may believe that it's not good politics. But I want to say that I have a deep respect for those who choose to stand on the side of progress for our country this week. So for those that stand up this week and answer the call for courage, I can say with confidence, your courage will be respected and remembered when the history of this struggle is written. In June, I had the opportunity to speak at the Department of Justice during its Pride Month observations. It was fitting that we gathered in a building that bears the name of Robert F. Kennedy. He became Attorney General at a time of rapid progress in the area of civil rights, progress that thrilled many Americans and frightened others. Kennedy knew, however, that America should be on the side of progress. He traveled to Georgia, at the time unfriendly territory for a civil rights reformer, to make his first formal speech at the University of Georgia Law School. And he didn't shy away from the Kennedy administration's commitment to equal opportunity. For on this generation of Americans, he explained, falls the full burden of proving to the world that we really mean it when we say that all men are created free and equal before the law. He backed up his words with actions, not only by vigorously enforcing the laws and court orders that advance the cause of civil rights, but by holding the Kennedy administration itself accountable, demanding that the Justice Department and other government entities prioritize diversity in the workplace. Of course, as much progress as that generation made in fulfilling the promises America makes about fairness and equality, there was plenty left to do for the generations that have followed. Today we continue that work, guided by the belief that everyone deserves a fair shot at the American dream, and that our LGBT family members, friends, and neighbors deserve to be treated like everyone else in the United States. Every American deserves the freedom to work free of discrimination. And passing the Employment Non-Discrimination Act strengthens this freedom by recognizing the right to be judged based on your skills, talents, loyalty, character, integrity, and work ethic. My home state of Wisconsin was the first state in the nation to add sexual orientation to its anti-discrimination laws. At the time, back in 1982, only 41 municipalities and 8 counties in the United States offered limited protections against discrimination based on sexual orientation. Wisconsin's efforts to pass the nation's first sexual orientation anti-discrimination statute were supported by a broad and bipartisan coalition, including members of the clergy, various religious denominations, medical and professional groups. The measure was signed into law by our Republican governor, Lee Sherman Dreyfus, who based his decision to support the measure on the success of municipal ordinances providing similar protections against discrimination. Since Wisconsin passed its statute in 1982, 20 states and the District of Columbia, representing nearly 45% of our nation's population, have passed similar anti-discrimination measures. 16 states and the District of Columbia also protect their citizens on the basis of gender identity. However, 76 million American workers have to contend with the ugly reality that in over 24 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT employees. And that is simply wrong, and this legislation seeks to right that wrong. The business community understands this. That's why a majority of Fortune 500 companies have sexual orientation and gender identity non-discrimination policies in place. And more than 100 companies have endorsed this bill. It's time to level the playing field and extend these protections to all Americans. But we don't just want to live in a country where our rights are respected under the law. We want to live in a country where we are respected for who we are, where we enjoy freedom and opportunity, because that's who we are as Americans. More than 5 years after he spoke at the University of Georgia Law School, half a world away, at Cape Town University in South Africa, Robert F. Kennedy said, "Few will have the greatness to bend history, but each of us can work to change a small portion of the events, and then the total, all of these acts, will be written in the history of this generation." The change we work for today can add up to incredible progress in our lifetimes. This generation can be the one in which we fulfill the promises of freedom and equality for all, in which America finally becomes a place where everyone's rights are respected at work and every family's love and commitment can be recognized and respected and rewarded under the law. I am hopeful that we can now move this Employment Non-Discrimination Act forward to build a tomorrow that is more equal, not less, for all Americans. I yield back my time and suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Senators have been debating a non-discrimination bill for LGBT employees, and the White House released a statement about it, saying that the president supports the bill because it would establish lasting and comprehensive federal protections against employment discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. The statement goes on to say that this bipartisan legislation is necessary to ensure that strong federal protections exist for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender workers, no matter where they live. A procedural vote on the bill is expected later today, along with the confirmation votes on a pair of judicial nominees, which will take place at around 5:30 this evening. While we wait for a senator to speak, we'll hear from a reporter from the Wall Street Journal talking about housing on this morning's Washington Journal.
Each week in this segment of the Washington Journal, we take a look at how your money is at work in a different federal program. And this week, Wall Street Journal reporter Nick Timmeros joins us from New York to talk about the Federal Housing Administration, which for the first time in its 80-year history asked for and received a transfer this year from the Treasury Department to stabilize its financial position. The transfer came out to about $1.7 billion. Nick Timmeros, for those folks who may not be familiar,
a longtime supporter and original co-sponsor of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, known more commonly as ENDA. This bill would affirm the principle that individuals in the workplace should be judged on their skills and their abilities and not on extraneous criteria like sexual orientation. Back in 2002, more than 10 years ago, I was proud to join Senator Ted Kennedy, whom we all remember as a lifelong champion of civil rights, as the co-sponsor of ENDA. And I'm pleased to support this important bill again today. But I'm dismayed that so many years have gone by, more than a decade, and this bill still has not become law. Madam President, it is time for us to enact this important legislation. I want to recognize the efforts of the chief sponsors of this bill, Senators Merkley and Kirk, for taking up the cause and moving this bill forward. I also want to acknowledge the work of Chairman Tom Harkin in bringing this bill to the Senate floor. He, too, has been a champion of civil rights throughout his long career. And I hope that as he retires at the end of this Congress, that this bill will be one more of his accomplishments. The time to pass it has come. Madam President, all Americans deserve a fair opportunity to pursue the American dream. Over the years, we have rightly taken a stand against workplace discrimination based on race, gender, national origin, religion, age, and disability. It is past time that we ensure that all employees are judged solely based on their talents, abilities, their hard work, their capabilities, by closing an important gap in federal employment law as it relates to sexual orientation. For the right to work is fundamental. How can we, in good conscience, deny that right to any LGBT American who is qualified and willing to work? Especially in today's economy, job security has taken on an even greater importance to all Americans. How can we, in good conscience, tell one segment of Americans that they are not entitled to that security because of whom they love? Equal rights in the workplace is neither a new nor a revolutionary concept. Much of corporate America has already embraced LGBT protections. Why? Because it allows them to attract the best and the brightest employees and to retain talented employees. Nearly 90% of Fortune 500 companies already have sexual orientation non-discrimination policies in place. And many Maine businesses and businesses associated with the state of Maine have such policies. They include IDEX Laboratories, LL Bean, Maine Medical Center, the Warren Center in Bangor, Hannaford Supermarkets, Bath Iron Works, Unum, a large insurance company. There are many, many more. And, Madam President, I would ask that the list of Maine headquartered companies and businesses that are associated with the state of Maine be included in the record at the end of my remarks today.
Without objection.
In addition, ENDA is very similar to current law in nearly 24 states, including, I'm proud to say, this great state of Maine. But, Madam President, in spite of how far we've advanced the cause of civil rights in this country, it still remains legal in 29 states to fire or to refuse to hire someone simply because he or she is lesbian, gay, or bisexual. Now, most businesses don't discriminate. They simply want to hire the best worker for the job, regardless of sexual orientation. But in others, high-performing LGBT employees can be and still are legally discriminated against. You know, Madam President, when I discuss this issue with many of my constituents, they're shocked to learn that it is legal under federal law, not Maine law, but federal law, for them to refuse to hire or to fire someone solely because of their sexual orientation. They find that shocking. They just assume that our civil rights laws, which protect people from discrimination based on race, gender, religion, age, also protect individuals based on sexual orientation. And of course, because they are operating in the state of Maine, they cannot legally discriminate against an individual based on sexual orientation, and I'm proud to say that the vast majority of Maine's businesses would never think of discriminating based on sexual orientation. They simply want to hire and retain the best person for the job. Madam President, along with former Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut, I worked hard to repeal the military's discriminatory policy of don't ask, don't tell. That policy prevented gay and lesbian service members from being open about their sexual orientation. My view was that if they were willing to put on the uniform of our country, to be deployed to distant lands, to risk their lives for us, we should be thanking them, not trying to exclude them from serving in the military. And now that Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been repealed, I think it is significant that the implementation of repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell has gone so smoothly. It's gone very well, contrary to the dire predictions of some of the opponents. And we hear some of the same kinds of predictions today as we debate this bill. And, Madam President, I would say that just as the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been implemented quite smoothly, that we will see ENDA implemented smoothly as well if we stand up, do what is right, and pass this bill. The bill before the Senate deserves support as a matter of fairness and as a matter of civil rights. It is a common-sense solution consistent with existing federal civil rights laws, and it will not place an undue burden on American employers. We would not see so many companies voluntarily adopting non-discrimination policies if it were somehow burdensome to do so. They're doing so because it's in their own best interest, because they want the most qualified employees and to retain the most talented employees regardless of their sexual orientation. That is not relevant to their ability to do the job. But finally, Madam President, it's simply the right thing to do to pass this bill. We cannot, in this day and age, countenance legal discrimination against qualified employees and applicants. It is past time that we enact this bill into law. I urge my colleagues to support ENDA, and I am hopeful that we will get more than the 60 votes needed this evening to proceed to this important bill. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President.
Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, let me thank my colleague from Maine for her statement. This is not a partisan issue. Senator Mark Kirk, my Republican colleague from Illinois, is a co-sponsor of this measure as well.